Hello, I'm going to show you how to make a fabric plant pot holder. It's double lined, so you could have it fully open or bend down with the colour, or up. I'll have it on the orange side. So I'm going to show you how to do this. You'll have got a kit through the post, and in your kit you'll have a pattern. So that's for the base, and that is for the height. So the height here, and this one is for the base. Okay, so you'll have got a pattern in your kit. You'll have got some interfacings. This is iron-on interfacing to give it a bit of strength to stand up. You've got the outer fabric and the inner fabric. So I'm using black to go alongside this orange, blue and black fabric. Firstly, what I'm going to show you how to do is we're going to cut one layer out. So we need to cut two of this higher one, and I'm going to cut one out of the patterned fabric and then one out of the black later. I'm going to do my plant pot base in my patterned fabric for both sides to give it a bit of strength, because this is a bit thicker. So you'll need some pins. So you're going to pin this to your fabric. Let's do the corners first. Once I've pinned the tall one, I'm now going to pin the plant pot base. And then once I've secured that, I'm going to cut it all out. So you need some fairly sharp scissors, because obviously it's fabric. And cut it out as accurately as you possibly can. So once you've cut the base out, I'm then going to cut the main fabric out for the plant pot. What I find easier is if you put your hand on your pattern and then cut along, it kind of holds your pattern in place as well as the pins. So cut the whole of that rectangle out. So I've got my rectangle out of fabric and my base out of fabric. And like I said, I want to do another base out of the patterned fabric. So again, I'm going to place my base on, pin it on again. Make sure that's flat, and then cut another base. Once you've cut your base, your second base, I'm going to take my pins out. So I now have my beginnings of my plant pot. So I've got two bases and my rectangle tall. So now what I need to do is I need another one of these, but I'm going to do that in a contrast fabric. So I'm going to do it in black because it goes well with the print that I've got. So all I need to cut out in this one is your rectangle again. So exactly as you've done before, you're going to pin it on. Once you've pinned the contrast one on, you're then going to cut it out. Once you cut it out, again, take all your pins out. So I now have, start my plant pot. contrast, the main fabric, and 2 bases. So now all you've got to do is one more cutting out to give it some strength, so you don't want it to fall and collapse around your plant pot. We're going to use some iron-on interfacing, which is in your kit. It's got a shiny side, as you can see, and a dull side. The shiny side has the glue on it, so we're just going to cut that out. So we need to have just one to give it some strength. I'm going to cut it out on the dull side. And lay your pattern on this one and cut this one out. So again, pin it on and cut it out. Okay. So I now have my rectangle, my contrast rectangle, my fusing, and 2 bases. My first job is that I want to iron the fusing onto my plant pot. I want to iron it onto the one that I want facing. So whichever one I'm going to have as the main fabric, so I would iron it onto the blue one here, not the contrast one. So I'm going to iron it onto the blue one, make sure I've got the right side of the fabric. So on the wrong side of your fabric, my print's a little bit duller on the wrong side. I'm going to iron on my fusing. So it's shiny side onto your fabric, and then take it over to the iron and it'll glue onto it. Don't iron on this side. If you're going to iron it, I would suggest putting a cloth over it, and then with a hot iron it on, take that off, move it along. So you're not going to get this stuck to your iron, because it will burn. You need it your iron quite hot for the glue to melt and stick onto your fabric, but you don't want this sticking onto your iron. So I would put a cloth over it while you're ironing it. Okay, so I'm just going to go over to my iron and iron this on. Right, so I've ironed it onto the main fabric. It's all melted on. You make sure that you don't get any bubbles into it and that it is nice and flat. So that's ironed on, and you can feel that it's giving it some real strength. So what I also want to do is put some fusing onto the base. So just one of the bases again on the outer base. I'm going to cut this around. Again, you can pin it on. So I'm just going to actually use my base. I've got it shiny side up. So then I know once I've cut it out, I can just take it straight to the iron and iron it on. Okay, so once you've got it pinned, your base round. Okay, take my pins out. And I'm ready to iron this on. So I've got shiny side to the wrong side of my fabric. So I've got shiny side to the wrong side of my fabric, and I'm just going to iron that on so it'll be the same as this one. Right, so I've now got 2 bases, one plain, one with fusing to give it some strength. My inner plant pot, my outer with fusing on it. So now I'm ready to sew. So you need your sewing machine. You need your thread and your sewing machine and some pins. Right, so first of all, I've got my base. So this is going to be my inner base because it hasn't got any fusing on it, and my contrast base. Okay, so what I'm going to do is fold my base in half. So I've got it in half, and where the fold is, I'm just going to put a pin. Okay, so that's found me the halfway point of my base. Okay, then I'm going to fold the bottom up as well, and again I'm going to put a pin on the halfway point. Okay, that's where I'm going to start. So you'll find that your outer rectangle is a little bit bigger than this, but it just makes it a lot easier. So I'm going to put it half again there. So I've got 2 pins on either side, and that's half of the circle. Okay, so I'm going to pin it where I've got my middle pin. I'm going to take that one out and just use the one that I've got on my base. And then I'm going to put a few more. So it's right sides together. So I've got right side to right side. I'm going to work it round, pinning as I go. Okay. So I would pin it sort of every 3 or 4 centimeters until I get to my next pin, which is showing me that that's half of the base, and I'll use that pin. And then I'm going to do exactly the same, but starting from the other end. So I'm going to start from this end, adding a pin every 3 or 4 centimeters. Okay, until you come to the end again. So I'm back at my center pin. So I've met halfway again. So you'll see that they overlap a little bit. So you've got more fabric than's actually needed, but that'll just make it easier to sew. So then you're ready to sew it. I would sew it with the base on the top, because you're going around the circular to a straight. It'll make it easier. And if you put your pins in how I've put them in, again, putting your pins in like this is much better on a circular than trying to put them in like that. Holds it much better. Okay, so now we're ready to sew our base to our inner. I'm going to start where I'd stopped with my, so where your overlap is. So I've got these 2 bits overlapped. I'm going to start there. This pattern has a centimetre seam allowance. So use your guide on your sewing machine. You'll see that it says 10. That's a centimetre, 10 millimetres. I would back tack as well. Right, so I'm in position and I'm ready. So I'm going to back tack and then work my way around. So I'll go as slowly as you possibly can to make sure you're not getting any tucks and taking your pins out as you go. Make sure your stitch length isn't too small, because if it's really small you don't get much control over your machine, so I would keep it as a fairly big stitch. All my sewing machines are different. Mine's on number 8, but yours will be completely different. So if it's 1 to 5, I would have it on about 3 for your stitch length. So you're just gently working your way around your circle, keeping it at a centimetre seam allowance and making sure you're not getting any tucks on that side. Okay. So when you start coming to the end of getting around your circle, try and meet up. So you've got your excess here and your excess here. Try and meet up with your stitch completely and back tack. Okay, so then it's sewn all the way to where you started and you've got this overlap here. You've got some overlap. All right. So then what you're going to do is sew up the side. So measuring it out. Mine's overlapping a little bit more. I'm going to lay it flat. my base there, laying it flat. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if I can make you see it a bit better. So once you've got your seam flat, I'm going to pin it. And again, I'm going to pin it how I pinned my base on, with my pins going inwards rather than along. So I've pinned it now all the way down my plant pot. I've got my base here and where it meets. So you can see that I've got quite a bit of excess from there. So what's a good idea, because I want it to be straight and I want it to meet there, I'm going to bend that over like that. So I can see my stitching where I want to meet, so I wanted to take about that much off. So what I would do is get some chalk up and then mark it along. So I want to sew along here. If you have a ruler, great. So that gives me a sewing line. On the inner one, I want to leave a gap because that's where I'm going to pull it through. So I'm just going to draw 2 lines to give me the gap. So I'm going to sew from there to there, back tack, from here to the end and back tack both bits as well. So I'll end up with a gap to be able to pull it through. Okay. So on your inner one, you'll end up with a sewn bit there, and that's my gap where I pulled it all to be the right side. Okay, so we need our sewing machines again, and I'm going to sew along there. Right, so I'm going to start at the top, I'm going to back tack, take my pins out as I'm going again. So I'm going to stop at that line, back tack, needle up, and then pull it across to that line, needle down, pin out, foot down, back tack, pin out, and then sew all the way down to my initial sewing from when I put the base in, and back tack. Okay, so you can see that I've sewn up to the base stitching. I've done my upper one in cream so that you can see it's the stitching. Alright, so I've got my gap there. I've got a gap. Okay. So now you've sewn it, I can cut the excess off now. So I'm just going to cut this excess off because it'll just make it a bit too bulky. I'm just going to cut a centimetre away from my stitch line, all the way up, so I can get rid of that. Okay. So that's one done. So that's your inner one done, ready for your outer one. I've started with this one because it's a little bit easier without the fusing. Okay, and you've got your hole there to pull it through. Alright, so we can put that to one side now. So we've now got our base and our upper one. So this is our outer one. So I'm going to do exactly the same as what we've already done. I'm going to fold it in half and put a pin at the centre. So I'm going to open it up. It's a bit easier to see your crease line now on this one because it's got fusing on it. A pin there to show my half, and then the same with this one. Fold it in half. And again, you can see the crease line a bit better. So, pin at one end and a pin in the other half. So when I fold it, I've got 2 pins that are telling me where the centre of the circle is, and I've got one on my upper. So I'm going to turn this round so it's right sides up, so right sides together again. So I'm going to pin where I've got this pin, I'm going to take this one, take that one out, and then pin that one to that one, so I know that that's in the center. Okay, and again, as we did before, I'm going to work around it every 2 to 3 to 4 centimeters around the circular. So you'll find this one a little bit harder because it's stiffer with having the fusing on, so it's not going to sort of be manipulated as easily as your other one. That's why I started with the easy bit first and then moving on to this one. Okay, so just as you did before, all the way around. Till you get to your center pin again. So I'm at my center pin now, so I'm going to stop there. And you can see the overlay again, so I've got a bit of an overlap, and again that just makes it easier for you to make. Then I'm going to turn it around and then start on the other side as well. So again, leave a fairly large gap and work your way around. So again, when I get to my center pin, that's where I'm going to stop. So you'll see you've got your overlay again of both pieces. Okay, so as you did before, we're going to sew all the way around, starting where the opening is here. So you're going to start my first pin and then work all my way around to my second pin. So again, remembering it's a centimetre seam allowance, pins out as you go, and remember to back tack. It's always useful to, if you're going to stop and take a pin out, to make sure your needle's in your fabric and it's holding it. Right, so I'm going to go all the way around again. So you're going all the way around until you get to where you started again. And remember to back tack. Okay. So you can see I've sewn all the way around. So, and then we've left the gap. Right, so you've met where you started. Okay, so again, you're going to pin all the way up the sides of your rectangle. My base is there, and again, you've got lots of excess on here, and that really just helps you to sew it. So again, I want to sew up to my stitch line there. Again, if you've got a ruler, great, use it. And this time we're going to sew it up all the way this time. I'm not going to leave any gaps. Okay, so I've got my sewing line there. You're going to sew all the way along that line, back tack and back tack, all the way along. Okay. Right, so I'm ready to sew, needle in, back tack, pins out as you go, and all the way down. Until you meet your sewing that you did on the base. Okay. Once you've sewn all the way down, again, just trim it so you've got about 1 centimetre seam allowance. Okay. What you can do to release your curve a little bit is just snip into the one with the fuse in. So you're going to snip about every 5 centimetres, a bit like your pin, where you put your pins. and you'll see that it'll just release the curve a little bit. Remember not to cut into your sewing. You're doing it just before your sewing starts. So little snips all the way around, which will just release your curve on your main one. Don't do it on your lining one, because that's going to go on the inside. So you can see how that's released my curve now, much better. So that's it, that's your cylinder made up to now. So what you need to do now is get your lining one, and you need to turn this right sides out. Okay, so I've got my right sides now, my seams have gone. What I'm going to do is put it in my cylinder. What I want you to do is, when you put it in, you need to match your seams. So that's my seam there and that's my seam there. So I'm matching those before I start pinning. So I'm going to match those. A bit like when we match the centres. And then I'm going to pin all the way around. So it's right sides together. You can see the right side's in there. The wrong side in there, sorry. And you've got right sides together. So you can see the seams on this side and you can see the seams on this side. Okay, so you're just going to pin all the way around. Again, it's easier to take your pins out while you're sewing if you put your pins in that way around. And then I'm just going to pin all the way around. So once you've pinned it all the way around, so I've got pins all the way around. Till I get back to this seam. So I'm going to start sewing from the seam and I'm going to sew all the way around. Don't need to leave a gap because we've left a gap on the inside. Right, so again, centimetre seam allowance, back tack, and then I'm just going to, again, stop with your needle in while you're taking your pins out. It stops you losing what you're sewing. So all the way around. So once you've sewn all the way around the top edge, again, I'm just going to snip to release the curve for when I press my plant pot when I iron it. Again, making sure you don't cut into your stitching. It's just a little snip all the way around. Again, every 4 or 5 centimetres to get to the centre. So what you're going to do is put your hand in, and through your slit that you left in your lining, you're going to pull your plant pot through there. Okay, so be gentle when you're pulling it. Okay, so you end up with the right sides out now. And what you'll do is put your inner one inside. So then you need to go to your iron and give this a really good press on the outer edge so that they are matched like that rather than it hanging over like that. You need to press it so they're a really nice crisp edge. Okay, so now you have a really lovely crisp edge all around there. So your last job, so now you have a really lovely crisp edge all around there. So your last job is to fasten up that opening. Because you're never really going to see it, you can just put it together, pin it together, and just sew it. So it'll end up like that. You've got sun edge on the inner. But like I say, you won't see it because it's inside your plant pot. Once you've sewn that, so I've done it in white so you can see it, you'll put your inner back into your plant pot. And this might be a bit creased from trying to get it through the hole that you left before. So I'm just going to give mine a bit of a press, and then I might press my contrast over like this one. So once you're giving it a press, I've got my contrast, my inner, my base, it's ready for a plant. So that's your how to make your fabric plant pot holder. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you.